This is the Louie T Network. The Redskins Report.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sisterin. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. Going to do it a little differently today. Look, if you watch the game, I really don't need to explain to you why this is going to be a different show. We're probably going to talk less about the game and more about everything happening around Redskins Park, and for good reason. I mean, 45-10 speaks for itself. So I took the liberty to reach out to my man, Burgundy Fly Guy. If you've seen his channel, you know he does remarkable work on the Redskins. He, like myself and like you out there, most of you out there, is a Redskins fan, and he's passionate just like I am, and I feel like he does some really exceptional work on the Redskins, and I really value his opinion. So I reached out to him. We've been talking about this topic on and off again, and we've decided to link up and do a show together, really addressing this team, the state of the franchise. I mean, it just, everything seems bad right now, and so I want to take this time to bring my man, Burgundy Fly Guy, in. How you doing, Burgundy Fly Guy, man? I wish we were meeting under better terms, but it's been a rough 24 hours, much less a rough Sunday for all of us, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you very, very much for having me on the show. That was a great intro. You're right. It's a really, really tough time for Redskin fans right now, especially during that game. We've got a lot of stuff that's coming out of Redskins Park that's not very good to hear, but you know, it makes for great fodder for us on our show, that's for sure.
Indeed it does. Again, okay, let's just start with the game. I just get this out of the way. Redskins 45-10. Chiefs come in and absolutely dismantle the Redskins in every facet of the football game. Robert goes and throws an interception early on, really sets the tone for the game. They run that down deep into Redskins territory, end up getting in the end zone. It was a poor defensive showing. They could not tackle Jamal Charles. They could not tackle Dwayne Bowe. They couldn't get pressure on Alex Smith. You name it, they did it offensively. What was worse was the special teams. They've been really a source of disappointment all season long. That didn't change today. In fact, I think they were the biggest embarrassment in all of this today, is how bad. And I was talking to BFG about the special teams, and he said he's just tired of teams coming into DC and setting records on us. Go ahead and elaborate on that a little bit, if you will. I mean, just watching the special teams unit today was a joke. It really was.
It was. It's something that has been brought up amongst a lot of different Redskin fans that I talk to, that I hang out with, watch games with every single week, and it's kind of an effort that's being brought up by a lot of different people. It's even hit the media a couple times, but it's growing more and more frustrating being a fan of this team and seeing franchises come in here and just set records. Kind of obvious after coming into this week that Kansas City, after suffering some big losses, was looking to more than likely come in here and tee off. But I didn't necessarily think that it's not a big surprise if you're a Redskin fan that they come in here and set franchise records on special teams and all this other stuff. But this seems to be kind of a moniker of ours to just, kind of let these teams come in here, steamroll us, beat us up, and throw us around a little bit. And, it's kind of like your comments in one of your shows last week, where you were talking about, just taking a whooping and dusting your hat off and kind of wiping the blood off. You got pretty elaborate there. I was kind of shocked, but, that's exactly the way it is. But, today's loss was a little bit more than that. Today's loss was just getting, overall jumped by a group of people.
Yeah.
It didn't end well, and that stadium cleared out pretty fast. but it's starting to become kind of a moniker, right? I think this has happened several times this season, where teams have come in here and have set franchise records on us, whether it's been on offense or defense, and it's getting to the point, just like with Justin Tuck last week, where he just kind of throws his arms up and says, "Hey, man, we got to do. This is kind of embarrassing."
Yeah. And I mean, did you see the scene at halftime? I mean, they showed a still shot of the stadium. It was empty. It was ghost town. Empty. And I mean, that I think is, I mean, I know it was cold and it was a wintry mix out there, but I mean, I think that was more of a statement of the fans saying, hey, we're not putting up with this. You know, I mean, I could watch this from my house. I could watch something else. I could be doing something else with my time. I mean, generally speaking, Redskins fans normally, when things are going bad, they sell their tickets to other teams' fans and they fill up our stadium, but they're not even doing that. You know, I mean, it just was a bad scene, and it reminded me of the Kansas City game 4 years ago, where I thought we really hit rock bottom under the Jim Zorn era, where the Chiefs came in and they were a terrible team, and I felt like, well, if we can't beat this Kansas City Chiefs team, what does that say about us? And we went out, we laid an egg, we lost that game something like 13-10 or 10-6 or something of that nature. It was just really bad, and this felt a lot like that. All I could do as a Redskins fan is laugh at this game, and because it was funny. My wife was sitting there as I was, laughing hysterically at the television screen because it was funny. We score for the first time in the game. We finally get on the board, and we give up a touchdown like not even 10 seconds thereafter, it seems like. And we score a touchdown and you feel like, okay, maybe we're getting back in the game. Maybe they're going to show a little life. We get the ball after halftime. They kick it off and they run it back. For a touchdown. And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. But forget about the game. 45-10, Chiefs absolutely destroy us. Let's talk about what really is at the crux of this problem. And that's, of course, Mike Shanahan and his whole administration. It seems to me that right now, before every game, there's something being released by the media about this organization, about this coaching staff, about Robert Griffin III, and it seems to have the most precise timing each and every single week right before a game. It's like they're dropping a bomb on us, an hour before the game, and it's hard for us to kind of focus in on what's going on for the game because the Redskins have had something come out, I think, each of the last 3 weeks, whether it's been Robert and him not wanting bad plays to be shown, or this story that came out about Mike Shanahan. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a rift between Shanahan and Robert Griffin III it started back in January of last season, and it's just been a roller coaster. And I think this one is the most, concrete one that I think probably has a lot of validity to it. Of course, I'm referencing the Mike Shanahan being so agitated by the fact that Robert Griffin III was essentially buddy-buddy with Daniel Snyder, that he had cleaned out his office. And this was prior to the Seattle game, okay? So they had won the division. They had a playoff game upcoming. And he cleaned out his office, and he was ready to resign. He was ready to walk away because of the relationship between Robert Griffin III and Daniel Snyder. And the only thing that in the story, in the article, that says that stopped him from leaving was that Robert went down with that catastrophic injury, and he didn't want to look bad. He said it would have looked bad. It would have looked as if he was quitting because Robert got injured, and that he botched that whole situation, and he didn't want to leave on that note. So that's what ended up making him stay. I'd love for you to elaborate on this whole situation. A lot of times you really dive into situations like this, and you are very, very elaborate with how you break it down. And so I really want to get your input on this, BFG.
Well, I think the interesting part about this is just like you said, the timing of these reports that are coming out. They're very suspect. They're coming out at the perfect time, and it's obvious to a lot of people that we've obviously got somebody within the organization that's doing some talking. And I kind of get the impression that the media feels compelled to do what it is the media does, and that's report, things, whether they're true or not. They got to get it out there. And mind you, this report that just came out today, before today's game, was reported by Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com. Now, Greg Rosenthal's, in my opinion, a fairly reputable individual.
Indeed. Yep.
He's a guy whose reputation speaks for itself. So it's not. I would not consider Greg Rosenthal to be somebody to not fact check. This is probably something that's whether it's got validation through several people or whether he's been sitting on this for a while and just now broke it out after he was able to get verification. I'm not sure exactly which, but Greg Rosenthal is not going to throw something out there that's just from one person that is who's got a lot of animosity towards the organization. He's gonna do everything in his power to make sure that his rear end gets covered on this. He also was the one that also reported today on NFL.com the whole issue with Daniel Snyder being upset, or as he would put it, in quotes, pissed at the state of the Washington Redskins. You had mentioned before that there was a report that came out, and this one, if I'm not mistaken, was from Kevin Patra, who was a guy that reported that RG3 asked that the Redskins not show bad plays during film review, and I think that had been refuted by not only the coach but by RG3 himself and a lot of the different players, just basically stating that wasn't necessarily true. Now, granted, Kevin Patra is not necessarily a guy I really know all that much about. So I come to kind of take that with a grain of salt. But when it comes to Greg Rosenthal, this issue obviously takes a completely different. Meaning. Yeah. There's a little bit more punch behind this, right. And I think right now the state of affairs within the organization, I think that every single move that our owner at this point does really, really needs to be methodical, really needs to be thought out, really needs to be passed through several different people in the organization. That kind of scares me to think about that because I think at this point it's almost kind of, especially I don't know if you noticed in that article about Shanahan talking about almost leaving. I think it was at the end of that article where he mentioned that he may be possibly trying to get out of here so he can take a bid for that Texans job with him and his son.
Absolutely. I heard that too, and I said, you know what, that makes a lot of sense, and they're very interested in him as well. So I think the feeling is mutual there. So
that's not very heartwarming when you're a Redskins fan to hear something like that. You got one guy that's already padding his fall when it comes to head coaching jobs, and mind you, this is something that's been brought up a lot last week because there's a lot of people within the DC media area that have been doing talk shows, radio shows, stuff like that have brought up that this is a $7 million coach that's got 3 wins. Yep. And granted, in the beginning, especially up until the last couple of weeks, I've been a big, staunch supporter of keeping Shanahan here and keeping that continuity. And the only benefit that I've seen from letting him go early would be to get another coach in here to mold this team in their, in their image, having all this cap space available, having these free agents to either sign or let go, to be able to have that kind of free reign to shape this team in the way that they would want to have that, as opposed to having Mike Shanahan decide that stuff for us and then come in a year after and try to fix all that. Yeah. That would have been the only reason for me getting rid of Shanahan early. Now it's a little bit different. Obviously, it's the manner in which we lose is going to be a big deal. And I don't know, according to Greg Rosenthal today, Daniel Snyder's not necessarily known as an individual to keep his calm and keep his cool. One thing to remember, guys, and this is something that you and I talked about before, Louie, we talked about individuals that keep bringing up certain names. Granted, certain coaches that we would like to see come back in here. John Gruden is one of those names that you had brought up, and there's been many, many different names. Lovie Smith is another one. We ran into this back before the Jim Zorn era, and Jim Zorn, I don't know if a lot of people remember this, was not at the top of our list.
Absolutely not.
Very, very low on that list, and he never even had a head coaching job before. He wasn't even an offensive coordinator in the pros. He was a quarterbacks coach.
Right. And if you remember that situation, he was hired as the offensive coordinator first. And remember, we went out and we hired. They were talking. There was speculation that we were going to hire Jim Fossil. And I think Redskins Nation stood up as one and said, if you hire him, there will be a mutiny.
Yes.
And I think that scared off Daniel Snyder, and he went back to his list of candidates and he realized there's really no one that wants this job. And he had to settle in on the fact that maybe I have to hire Jim Zorn as something a little bit more than offensive coordinator. So, that's how that situation went down.
I understand that. It's and bringing in Jim Zorn here obviously was not the first coach that we landed on. He was not a top-tier coach, in my opinion, to bring in here. And a lot of that, I would have to say a big portion of that is a lot of these guys did not want to come in here and work with somebody else's coaching staff. And I think the underlying part of that is that they didn't want to necessarily come in here and work for Daniel Snyder. Right. Now, that is where to kind of bring us back full circle to what I was mentioning before about being very, very careful about what we do. This is where I think firing Mike Shanahan right now would be a big mistake for us.
Yes, and I'm glad you took it there because I wanted to take it there next.
If we fire him early, granted, knock on wood, it's after midnight on the East Coast, and we haven't fired him yet. So maybe we're going to take this one day at a time.
Right.
But if we do let him go early, that is not going to bode well for some reputable coaches to come in here and work under this, under this current ownership, under this current regime. It's going to turn a lot of those guys away. That's probably a big part of just letting this guy finish out the season. Is obviously we're not going to the playoffs. He probably has lost the locker room. We're not seeing a whole lot of effort out there.
Well, we'll talk about that here shortly.
If we're talking really, truly about the future here, then we've really got to be careful where we go from here as far as our head coach goes.
I agree with you. I don't think there's a lot of good that can come of letting Mike Shanahan go now. I just don't see. I mean, again, if he's gone, then you've got to assume Cal is gone out of the door with him immediately. Effectively, as Mike leaves, so will Cal, I would assume. So who's going to run the offense? There's a lot of different issues that can arise. Of course, Jim Haslett can take over as interim head coach, or, Raheem Morris. Both of them have head coaching experience, but that's not the point. Like you said, there's some ramifications that would come of this if he were to be released as our coach. Right now, again, it's 3 games left. Just let him finish out the season. There's not much that can come of him being released as our coach right now and fired right here, essentially with 3 games left in the season. I mean, if you're targeting Art Briles, guess what? Art Briles will be there in 3 more weeks. He's not going anywhere. I can honestly say that if you're targeting someone like a Lovie Smith or someone like that, and the Texans already have gotten rid of their head coach, Gary Kubiak, so that they could go after guys right now, and you're trying to beat them to the punch, then I guess I could understand that, but I just don't see the rationale here of getting rid of Mike Shanahan at this juncture of the season. It does no good for this year, and it does no good for into the future, again, when you're talking about bringing in another head coach. So I hope that, like you said, Daniel Snyder really treads lightly right now and makes some smart decisions, but as I've always said about Daniel Snyder in the past, there's no one else there. There's no checks and balances with him. So there's not going to be anybody else there to say, hey, Dan, you probably need to take a step back here, take a breath, exhale, and kind of allow this situation to breathe for a second and don't make any rash decisions. You probably need to allow this situation to air out, give yourself a chance to calm down and make a sound decision and a great judgment call here, and do not rush to your emotions and make a rash decision. But you're asking a lot out of a guy that's very impatient, that wants instant gratification. I could honestly see Dan flipping out after this game. I mean, if you saw the attendance, they said that the Redskins set a record low attendance in this game. I think it was a lot of factors here. I think they know that this team isn't very good. That's number one. Number two, they were playing against a team defensively in the Chiefs that were really going to handcuff us. And number three, the weather was abysmal. And I think you factor all those things in, it was the perfect storm for us to set a record low attendance at FedEx Field. They said something like 56,000. I mean, again, this stadium holds over 90,000 fans. To only have 56,000 in attendance. And the Redskins, they fabricate numbers all the time. They could have easily, gave us some kind of bogus number. They couldn't even do that because the pictures, they say 1,000 words, and there was no one at this stadium. I mean, by halftime, it was a ghost town. It was funny. I looked at the Bleacher Report picture that they had posted on Twitter, and it was just amazing to see how empty this stadium. And I was watching the game. I could see the picture that they were posting, but I didn't really take a step back and look at that still shot of how the stadium was looking, and it looked like you could hear your echo at halftime if you were to say something. It was just really, really bad. Let's talk about. So I take it that you want Mike Shanahan to stay on for the remaining 3 games. Do you want him back? Do you think that there's even a chance that he's back past 3 games?
Given the given history, I don't think he's going to be back just based on what we have seen our owner do in the past. The only thing that I think that's kept him here this long is the fact that he's a Super Bowl winning coach.
Indeed. Indeed.
He had a soft spot in his heart for Joe Gibbs, and to tell you the truth, Super Bowl victories speak volumes with this owner. And I think that's probably the only reason why Shanahan is even still here. It's interesting to me. I honestly, my thought process has changed a lot just in the last 3 weeks. Because I think the last 3 weeks have been very, very telling. I think it's been before that I started to kind of see signs of it, especially during that game against San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Where I just saw players giving up. Yeah. And it's gradually gotten worse, and today was by far the worst I've ever seen it. Yeah. And it was more than just weather conditions. It was more than just, it being slippery out there. And
I mean, the Chiefs had to play in it too,
Exactly. And I don't know if you noticed, but the Chiefs, and I remember asking this during the game, I was like, how is it that the Chiefs are able to cut and move and juke in this snow, and we look like, like we're first time on ice skates.
Yeah, exactly.
Each other, we can't. We go to make a cut, and we slip and we fall. And honestly, I came at the end of that game thinking to myself, they just want it more.
Yeah.
We don't want it. We don't want to be out there. I think that this team is saying one thing to the media and saying something completely the opposite out on that field when it comes to putting out a product. I'm not seeing very much fight in this team. I'm seeing a lot of people whiffing on passes and a lot of people dropping the ball. There were some great passes that were caught today, but then again, like last week with the New York game, there were some passes that were dropped in there by receivers that normally don't ever drop passes. A lot of frustration going around, and there's a lot of things that are coaching related. Delay of game penalties, bad timeouts.
Right.
Reviewing a play that shouldn't be reviewed. These are all coaching issues.
Right.
This isn't something that we could dogpile on RG3, or this isn't something we can't dogpile on an aging middle linebacker. These are coaching issues, and these are issues that you would expect 4th year into a 5-year contract should somehow be fixed.
Right.
And for those of us that listen a lot to the DC media, this is something that's been reiterated week after week after week, and those are things that you can't shy away from. You can't deny those. That these are all glaring issues that are coaching staff issues that have not been fixed, that are not indicative of somebody that should be making $7 million a year. These are not mistakes that should be made when you're making that kind of money.
Yeah, my next question to you is, because watching this game, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, and we were talking about the state of the Redskins, and I said, he's like, do you think that, Shanahan will be back? And I said, these next 4 games will be very telling, because if the last 3 games, and those 3 games being the Philadelphia game, the San Francisco game, and the Giants game, if those 3 games are any indication of how this season is going to end, he won't be back. Because I said this team gradually, to me, is quitting. Each and every week, they're getting worse and worse. And I think today was a culmination of everything. I think this team has checked out. I think this team has quit. And it was funny, I watched a game day morning. I never watch any game day shows, any morning shows, any shows leading up to the games. I usually turn my television set on at approximately 12:55, and I set my 2 TVs up. I'm watching 2 games at once. And for some reason this morning, I had game day morning on, and they had a players only little roundtable discussion about when your team is bad and you don't have a chance to make the playoffs as a player, how does that affect you mentally? And it was very interesting. They had Warren Sapp, they had Michael Irvin, they had Marshall Faulk, and they had Kurt Warner. And all of them have been on bad teams before. All of them have been to the mountaintop before. So they know what it is and what it takes to get all the way to the top and conquer Mount Everest. And then they know what it feels like to look into the eyes of the other 52 guys in the locker room and know that they're defeated. And know that there's not a chance that you're going to be able to win on the field on that Sunday or any other Sunday for the rest of the season. And they all kind of said the same thing. And this, I found this rather startling because I didn't expect them to say this. Because you always hear people say, okay, get the U-Haul out. These guys have quit. They've packed it in for the winter. They're ready to go home. Yeah. And I heard every single one of them take their turns and essentially say in a different way that as a veteran, when you've been to the mountaintop or you've been to the playoffs and you know what it takes to get there and you're a bad team and you've been eliminated from playoff contention, you're ready to quit for that season. You don't want to play anymore. You're done. And they all reiterated that it's hard to look around the locker room and not see the fight in the rest of the players and yourself not be affected by it. Yeah. And you, like London Fletcher, I saw the desire. I saw the want, the will, the want to out there. I saw him, giving a rah-rah speech right before the game. Everybody get in and, him doing his thing. But at the end of the day, London Fletcher can't want it for all 52 other guys in that locker room. And so my question to you is, I said all that to say this. Do you think that this team has mentally checked out on this season, or have they mentally checked out on Mike Shanahan and his whole coaching staff?
That's a very, very good question. And I think every Redskins fan would have a different way of answering that. From my perspective, from what it is that I'm seeing, taking a look at this team, I think that, yes, they have checked out. They've checked out mentally. They've checked out physically. The interesting part that I'm noticing, though, is the manner in which they are checking out. It's one thing to be demoralized on a team and just not give an effort. Not give a full effort into your tackle, not give a full effort into your blocks, into running your route. I think there's a difference between that, and then there's a difference in what it is that I've actually been seeing. I think that when you're playing on a demoralized team and you're checked out mentally, and you're just trying to coast the rest of this season and hope that, just play the rest of these 3 games out and just let the season end so we can get into the offseason and worry about fixing this stuff. I think it's one thing to say that, but what it is I'm seeing, I'm seeing this team, and I hate to say it, it's almost looking retaliatory. I'm seeing a lot of people that are giving, especially the blocking. There's some, we all know, for those of us that have really been students of the game, we know that offensive line and that defensive line, that line of scrimmage is a car wreck every play. Mm-hmm. That these guys, you got to give 100% effort every single play. You've really got to go out there and lay your body on the line because you're either trying to get to the quarterback or you're trying to protect him. And you have a very specific job duty, and you got to hit that in just a couple seconds. You got to be able to do your job. And if you don't do your job, if you mess up just a little bit, it's over. I'm kind of seeing that a little bit, but I'm also seeing plays where there's guys that just they'll do something for a half a second, and then they'll check out. Now, I had mentioned it in a rant video that I had posted after the San Francisco 49er game, and it bothered me when I made that video. It bothered me after that video, and I've gone back and I've looked at it. This is something that I've been thinking about making a show, but I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to get into it, but I'll bring it up on your show here.
Yeah.
There was a play that I had mentioned, I think it was in the third quarter, where Trent Williams,
I remember you talking about that.
Blocked his person. The part that, and he ended up blowing his assignment. The guy ended up going around and ended up sacking RG3. Now, the interesting part about that is when Trent Williams throws his block, he gets his hands on his man, he's blocking, but Trent Williams turns around and looks at RG3 and sees RG3 running. If you watch Trent Williams, if you've got access to this game, go back and watch that play. He lets his man go. Now, that is not, in my opinion, the actions of an individual who has just given up, that just wants to coast this game and hopefully get it over with so we can go back in the locker room because I don't want to be here anymore. That's something different. And I've seen a couple plays where somebody has blown an assignment and it's been met with, oh well.
Yeah.
You know, it's not only devoid of passion, it's not only devoid of concern. This goes beyond just somebody writing a report saying nobody's coming back to pick up RG3 anymore.
Right.
He's getting sacked. He's getting knocked down to the behind. They're not coming back and picking him up. It's something more than that. So is this a campaign against RG3, or is this a campaign against the head coach? I don't know which. All I know is that situation has got to be met. It's got to be nipped in the bud. It's got to be a coaching staff that's got to be able to pull this team out of lethargy. Right now, that's not happening. So my honest opinion, I think that this team's not only checked out mentally, I think that this team has checked out physically. I think that there's some mutiny going on inside. And if you catch a couple of these commentators, whether it's on television or whether it's otherwise, they'll sit there and say the same thing. They'll be like, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
There is something going on here. Something's going on in that locker room that nobody is talking about. And all I know, I don't see too many instances where you have a reputable individual like Santana Moss, somebody who is a staunch veteran on this team,
right,
somebody that everybody looks up to on this offense, including the guy behind center, to come out and speak out against another individual on the team. I mean, when have you ever really heard of him doing that? He doesn't really do. He's not a guy that will come out and say, you know what, this guy screwed up, that guy screwed up, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
Santana Moss has never said that.
Right.
I mean, I've never really. He may have said it a long time ago. I've never.
No.
Him.
He's a stand-up guy, and
He's a very stand-up guy.
Yeah, that's
but
not
he came
something.
out the season and kind of said, "Hey, that throw against Philly, that's on RG3."
Right.
He was the last one to throw that ball, and then of course he came back and kind of recanted on that. But still, I've never. You're seeing some things that frankly, a lot of Redskin fans, myself included, the years and years that we've been watching this team and been fans of this team, that we have never ever seen before. And these are very, very interesting times, you know, under the ownership of Dan Snyder. I don't know necessarily what to say. It's very interesting.
I think you brought up a very valid point, and you kind of segued to where I was going next. I'll just say this about Mike Shanahan and the coaching staff right now. I think that they're definitely done. They're not coming back. I think whether it's tomorrow morning we wake up and he's been fired, or it's next week, or it's
back next year too. I remember that last couple of weeks. You've been a huge supporter of this Mike Shanahan.
I really wanted to stay the course. I was talking to a fellow Redskins fan, Bo, and he said, "Hey, my mantra is stay the course." And I said, "Man, you don't mind if I borrow that?" He was like, "Nah, man, we're all family. Go ahead and use it." And I was like, "I'm going to use that because we need to stay the course. You know, we need to keep down this path, because the difference between where we were the last time we played the Chiefs, when I felt like we had hit rock bottom, and where we are now is that Mike Shanahan came in and he fixed us organizationally in terms of the roster and how you do things as a real organization, a real NFL outfit. He changed that to a certain degree. Now we're back to dysfunctionality now, but in terms of the roster and us actually being a credible football team, that's been fixed. We just need more talent now. But Mike Shanahan, I think he served his purpose now. And I really felt so strongly that he needed to be back, that Jim Haslett needed to be back, that everybody except Keith Burns, the special teams coach, needed to be back. And that we needed to continue to build on what we had already started and not start this thing over, not blow it up and start over from the ground up. But that's essentially what's going to happen now, is that you're going to have a new staff come in, a new head coach. He's going to evaluate all the players, and he might clean house. He might get rid of, 15 guys that were on this roster a year ago and go out in free agency and get guys that he feels like can help him and do some things in the draft. And we could be looking at a totally different, run Redskins organization next year. It's alarming because here we are again going into the unknown. And, as humans, that's always a scary proposition for us when you just don't know what the future is going to hold for this franchise. But I think when it's all said and done, Mike Shanahan will be done. And the question isn't if anymore. It's a matter of when now. And I think that's where we are with that situation. But I'm ready to move on to a different topic now. Let's talk about Robert Griffin III, because I think you just perfectly segued into where I wanted to go next, talking about players. And it was interesting when, I was listening to a couple of people speak on the subject matter of Robert Griffin III. And I've seen articles about players maybe having some kind of malcontent for Robert Griffin III and the preferential treatment that he may or may not be receiving from Daniel Snyder. I've heard that, his wife, at the time, fiance Rebecca Liddycoat, was being picked up by private jets and limos and things of that nature. And I remember a story I heard about him wanting her around when he was first drafted, and she was around, and they didn't want her around, and he insisted that she was there, and Daniel Snyder made it known to everyone else that she could be there because Robert wanted her there. And again, one of those situations where I just brushed it off. It's whatever. I was caught up, like you said, drinking that Robert Griffin III Kool-Aid, and so I didn't want to hear anything negative. But you could kind of see these things kind of creeping in at the beginning. And I honestly do not think that Pierre Garçon is a huge Robert Griffin III fan. You hear his comments and some of the ways he carries and conducts himself. Him kicking the football last week and against the Giants, and some of his comments in the media. I don't think he's a huge Robert Griffin III fan, and I don't think he's alone in that he's not a big Robert Griffin III fan. I kind of want to speak to some of the things because, like you just alluded to, Santana Moss, a veteran, and at points I ask myself, why are there certain guys on this roster like a Santana Moss, and you need guys like him in the locker room to handle situations like that Robert Griffin III situation, when after the Philadelphia game he comes out and he essentially points the blame everywhere but himself. You need veterans to step up and handle that situation. And I thought Santana actually handled that well. That needed to be said. He said it, but again, like you said, he kind of moonwalked after it, but that's because a lot of unwanted press came his way after those comments were made. But he said what he needed to say, and he meant what he said. I think that Santana Moss had an issue with what Robert was saying and what he was doing, his actions. And then if you haven't heard his press conference after this game, I think Robert essentially threw Mike Shanahan under the bus once again.
That's huge.
And it's just getting old with Robert now and the things, because he always goes about it in a roundabout way. He never directly throws you under the bus. He indirectly does it but by indirectly throwing you under the bus, you're directly throwing people under the bus. And in his press conference, he said something to the effect of, there are a lot of things going on right now that could be stopped, that could be nipped in the bud, essentially, but they're not being nipped in the bud. And he said, I'm not going to elaborate on that. I'm not going to talk about it any longer. But
he just threw it out there.
But he just threw it out there. Yeah, it's almost like you coming over and you've got gas and you walk into a room and you just let out a hot one, and then you leave it there to linger and you walk away. Yeah. And I feel like you can't say something like that leave it on the table. Don't address it. Don't say exactly what you mean. Don't clarify the situation. To just say that and then just to leave, that to me is just one of the worst things you could do as a player. And someone like himself who always finds himself in the middle of controversy, you can't allow something like that to be said. And so I want to get your take on Robert Griffin III, how he's viewed by his teammates. Do you think that he's a guy that they all are behind in this locker room? And do you think that Mike Shanahan leaving and probably being fired unceremoniously is in part because Robert Griffin III doesn't want him here? Because I feel like it's obvious that Robert Griffin III doesn't have a good relationship with Mike Shanahan. He doesn't trust him, and he wants him gone. Do you think that not only do the players might have, some kind of, I guess lack of trust with Robert is a better word or phrase to use. Do you think that they don't trust him? And do you think that Robert is a big part of why Mike Shanahan isn't going to be here in terms of him going to Daniel Snyder potentially and saying, hey, I don't think I can work with this guy any longer?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think Robert Griffin is probably a huge part in Mike Shanahan more than likely being ceremoniously escorted out of town. When you are the golden boy that has the owner's inner ear, that's not going to work well for you, especially when you're losing. One of the things that I'll bring up that has been brought up before by veterans of this team, every once in a while they will mention, and they all mention it, they don't mention it together, but they'll mention it on their own when talking about Robert Griffin III. They will speak about Robert Griffin III in high esteem. They got high hopes for this kid. The ceiling on this young man is through the roof, and obviously being the face of the franchise comes with a certain amount of responsibility, and they always try to speak very, very highly of him, but they always also try to underline that with the fact that he's still a kid. He's still 23 years old.
Right.
I think there have been several veterans that have brought this up. Even LeVar is a guy who I tend to kind of listen to a little bit on his show when he mentioned this guy's still a baby. He's not a rookie, but he's still kind of a daisy fresh rookie. He still does a lot of stuff that he doesn't know. And I kind of get this impression that Robert Griffin III has come into an organization and he has got the owner on a first-name basis. The family's got pretty much free reign of the company jet whenever they want. I do believe that was kind of what was said in that article.
Right.
They got free reign of the company jet. The old man's got, obviously, a couple reporters on speed dial that are printing everything that this guy is saying. That's not helping situations any. And if you're a player in this locker room that's out there, getting your face caved in every single week, and this stuff is going on top of the fact that you're losing, it's no surprise to me that things are that we have a mole somewhere in the organization that's reporting all this stuff to different reporters,
where is this stuff coming from, BFG?
Exactly. Somebody's got it out for us. Somebody's obviously talking to old Greg Rosenthal and whomever else. This stuff keeps coming up, but in my opinion, if you're coming into the league and you're brand new and you've been brought in with all kinds of fanfare, you've got parades literally that are in your honor. You're making it to movie premieres. You're on just about every commercial you could possibly think of on game day. You got to see his face, and then to know that he's in the back pocket of Daniel Snyder, probably not the most popular owner in the NFL, and somebody that the media really, really loves to hammer down on. I would imagine that if you're a player on this team, especially with some of the stuff that's gone on as of late, I could imagine how disgruntled some of these individuals would be. It makes perfect sense to me, but I do think that a big part of Mike Shanahan's exodus out of Washington, D.C. has a lot to do with Robert Griffin III, because this thing has started it started before this season. Redskin fans are never, and this is something, I'm from the West Coast, I'm surrounded by Seahawk fans, I've never admitted this here because it would go to their heads, but as Redskin fans, we have not made it out of that game against Seattle. we have a lot of this stems from that game, that moment, and it's a shame. I think that's where the crack first started in the relationship between Mike Shanahan and his quarterback. That trust factor, the media really took off with that, and is still to this day, at every last gasp, at every last opportunity, tries to bring up that Seattle Seahawks, loss at home and leaving Robert Griffin III in. It's interesting to see how things have shaped. And what really scares me is not so much the exodus of one Mike Shanahan, but the introduction of a new coach having to come into a situation where a 23-year-old kid could have very well been the major crux into basically getting a two-time Super Bowl champion coach ousted out of DC.
Yeah,
that's got to be a heck of a thing to come into.
Yeah, and I honestly think that the rift between the two and all of our problems actually dates back to the Ravens game when he actually initially got hurt, because that's when we started to see the other side of Robert Griffin III, the envious side, the side that didn't want Kirk Cousins to have success. The side that after the Cleveland Browns game when there was success by Kirk Cousins, he runs to the podium and instead of saying, hey, we got to win, I hope to be back next week, I could have played this game. I should have played this game. They didn't let me play. I'm ready to go. I'm playing next week. And that's essentially when you started to see the other side of Robert. And I think from that point on, things were different. Once he got injured, it was never the same. And, I think the Seattle game really exacerbated this problem. And here we are today. And I think you just hit it on the head again. What if Art Briles is the next head coach? What if Robert Griffin III essentially handpicked the next coach? What does that say to the players in the locker room? Because how can you as a player not feel like Robert Griffin III did not influence the head coaching search if Art Briles is the next? That's not a coincidence that the college coach, the guy that Robert candidly speaks about so often about how he loves this guy and how, he would run through a brick wall for Art Briles. Of course, we're talking about the coach of Baylor University. How could you not feel like he didn't help and wasn't a part of the process of him coming to DC if you're a player in that locker room?
Yeah. Nobody wants to see a young quarterback like that come in and ride roughshod over an organization. Now, granted, I understand the idea behind Art Briles coming here. Again, I don't have to mention this fact because obviously we are the poster child for extremely successful college coaches not being able to make it in the NFL. So obviously, we are getting, I don't know about you, but I get shivers just like any other Redskin fan at the notion of yet another possible Steve Spurrier, regime here in D.C. by bringing in an Art Briles. And Art Briles, I've got nothing but high regard and high esteem for Art Briles. I think Art Briles is a heck of a coach. He has completely taken that Baylor football team and made them a major national contender. They are beating teams that school has never beaten before.
Right.
And he's got them on a national stage now. That's huge feather in his cap, and he's going to be drawing some really large flies, especially from the pro ranks, to come take some of that magic in Baylor and give it to their organization. Now, it says a lot when that name keeps coming up, especially from a young man who played under his regime, to want to bring him here to D.C. If I'm a player, that kind of makes me nervous to think that a young man has that kind of influence and that kind of power. It makes you an extremely big target, in my opinion, especially when things are going down. I don't know if you've noticed, but even Robert Griffin III in some of these press conferences, and I've seen just highlights of what happened today. He's getting a little chippy here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Media. And even after everything that we've experienced this season, I don't think Robert Griffin III has come close to seeing what Washington D.C. can do to a quarterback that they don't like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you're putting out a losing record, and if you're not doing very, very good, this media can turn quick on you. And I don't even think the media is fully turned on Robert Griffin III. Not completely. They've printed up some very interesting articles that have not necessarily made him look good, but they've also been really, really easy on him.
I think they actually like him because
I think they do.
he's very candid with them. He tells them how he feels, and again, it's to a fault a lot of times, and you can't really express how you feel, and that's what Santana Moss essentially was saying, and that's what we've been saying. You and myself have been saying all along is that you can't tell them how you feel all the time. You know, there's a place and a time for everything, and sure, you can elaborate on some things sometimes, get it off your chest, but for the most part, you need to be able to just either say, hey, that's on me, that was my fault, and you just need to move on. You know, or certain times you say, hey, I really don't have a comment on that right now. I just don't want to talk about that, or whatever the case may be. However you decide to handle it. Guys handle it, you know, differently everywhere. And so you would hope that over time he'll learn how to deal with the media, because right now they love this guy because he's a walking quote for them.
Yeah.
Each and every single week. And so, like you said, he has no idea how bad this can really get, because this is nothing. You know, this is just the tip of the iceberg here. I mean, it can get 20 times worse than what it is right now if he thinks this is bad. And so it's a really tough situation, because I don't see how we win in all of this. We don't have a first round pick. The next coach that comes in here, whoever it is, Art Briles, John Gruden, I mean, it doesn't really matter. Whoever the next head coach is, there's a lot of things that have to be addressed, you know, and I don't know what the state of this locker room is right now, because again, I think there are a lot of players in this locker room who are not huge fans of Robert Griffin III, that feel like a lot of this squarely falls on his shoulders. He's to blame for a lot of this. And I said this watching the Seattle game last week, you know, and I hate making comments like this, but it's the truth. And I'm a guy, I don't sugarcoat anything. You know, I say it how I see it, and I tell it like it is. And I'm envious of Seattle, because Russell Wilson is everything that I want Robert Griffin III to be. You know, he carries and conducts himself in the manner that you would like Robert to. You know, he's very confident. Borderline cocky is Russell Wilson, but his confidence is channeled in a way that it is productive.
Yeah.
You know, where you know he's part of the team building aspect, and he gets it on and off the field. And that's what we thought we were getting in Robert. We thought we were getting a mature 22-year-old that got it, that understood what it meant to be a quarterback in the National Football League. He was eloquent. He knew how to put his words together. It just seemed too good to be true, and we're finding out that it was, in fact, too good to be true, and that he's not as mature as we thought. This guy is very mature, but he's got a lot of areas in which he has to mature. And right now we're seeing a lot of the byproduct of a guy that has a huge ego, that feels like, you know, and Cam Newton talked about this just tonight. I was watching him before the game, and he talked about when he first got in the league, he felt like he needed to do everything. And I feel like Robert, when he's on the field, he feels like he has to do everything, and he needs to be reminded, you're not at Baylor anymore. You know, you're not at Baylor. You're not going to be able to run past defensive ends anymore. They're just as fast as you are, linebackers, safeties, corners, all that stuff. You got to know when, okay, yeah, I made a good enough play here. I need to get down. I gotten enough yards on this play. I need to get down. Hey, this guy isn't open. I don't need to try to throw it in between two defenders. How about I take this check down? You got to know when enough is enough on the field, and he's got to know when enough is enough off the field, when you're at the press conference, and they throw you up a nice lob job. I mean, one that you could hammer and knock it out of the park. You got to know, all right, I'm going to lay off of that pitch. I'm not going to take the bait, because right now this is a leading question, leading me right down a dark alley that I don't need to travel down. But yet he still goes in there not knowing what's waiting for him once he gets into that alley, and he makes a comment like he did today, talking about how, you know, essentially he said Mike Shanahan is allowing things to go on this football team that shouldn't be going on. I mean, how naive can you be to say something like that and don't think that there's not going to be any backlash behind it? And just he's got to be better than that. And whoever the next coach is, I hope they address this. If it's Art Briles, we know it's not going to be addressed, you know.
Yeah.
And so, and if it is Art Briles and he comes in, how can you as a player not feel some type of way about that whole process and the way it was handled? And there are some guys in that locker room that feel like Mike Shanahan is a good coach. I believe them when they say that they feel like Mike Shanahan is a good coach. And it's just, oh my God, I feel like we've put ourselves in a situation where you're just like, how did we get here? How did we go from feeling like we hit the jackpot with Robert Griffin III? How do we go from a year ago this time feeling like, hey, I mean, I was one of the people that said, hey, we paid the price for Robert Griffin III. We gave up the picks, but I'm willing to burn the receipt. I don't need this receipt anymore because I'm so happy with what I bought with those draft picks that I don't need the receipt. I'm not taking it back. Yep. How did we go from there to where I'm like, where the hell is that receipt? Where's the receipt?
Where's the RG3 receipt?
Where's the receipt? I'm searching through the trash and I'm looking. Where's the receipt? And like, if I had to do this trade all over again, I still think that this guy is worth the picks we gave up as a talent. But from the standpoint of him being a headache and him drawing a lot of drama to this team that is unnecessary and him having his ego just be so inflated.
Yeah.
Sometimes I take a step back and I go, is this guy worth it?
Yeah.
What's your stance on that?
Well, you know, it's funny you had mentioned, you know, earlier, well, when it became very, very obvious, and I want to say I mentioned this before in a show, I can't remember if I have or not, but I didn't elaborate too much on it. But that season where we were obviously going to be going to the draft and looking for a college quarterback to come in here and be the future for this franchise, RG3, I remember I watched a ton of college football all throughout the entire week. Just Saturday's games was taking me all week to get through them, and I was watching all kinds of different games. I really, really wanted to have a really good grasp of when they start spewing out names from the college ranks. I wanted to be able to know that I've watched a couple games of tape of these individuals,
right,
and I wanted to be able to come up with a list of guys that I felt. Now, granted, I'm not a quarterback. I've never been a quarterback in my life. I've seen how they work out. I've seen how they watch film, and I see how quarterback coaches work with them. So I understand a little bit of the mechanics and how that works. But, you know, again, I'm not an expert. But I wanted to be able to come up with a list on my own. If I was to be owner of the Washington Redskins, exactly what would I do? Now, it was obvious coming into that draft that Andrew Luck was off the board. Mm-hmm. Andrew Luck was going to go to Indianapolis. They made it a point that that's pretty much who they were going to go with. And after that, it was going to be more than likely kind of a free-for-all for some pretty good, I thought, was some pretty good quarterbacks. Now, I feel that, especially in this area, I've got a lot of people that comment on my opinion of Russell Wilson, because I hit home on Russell Wilson a long time ago. When I found out that Russell Wilson went to Seattle, I was actually happy. I'm not a Seahawks fan. I hate the Seahawks. But I was glad to see Russell Wilson go there because I knew that in that case I was going to be able to keep a really close eye on his career because, you know, he's very, very close to me. I felt on my overall list of quarterbacks to take out of the draft, Russell Wilson was number 2 on my list behind Robert Griffin III. And I was really, really upset because the media pounded Russell Wilson and his height, the whole height issue. He's not very tall. Most successful quarterbacks in the NFL are at a certain height. I don't subscribe to that. I never have. I think you could be a successful quarterback at Russell Wilson's height, at Dante Culpepper's height. I don't care if you're 6'6" or 5'6". As long as you can throw that pigskin and do it accurately, I think that you're going to be fine. And frankly, if you're throwing over a lineman at 6'8", it doesn't matter how tall you are, you're not going to be able to see anyway. That's always been kind of a mantra of his. But coming out of Wisconsin, that kid played with such poise. I watched a bunch of his games, especially the Rose Bowl game against Oregon. That kid took a pounding in that game and still came back, was able to thread the needle between defenders, all while having people, darn near draped all over him. And I said, this kid's going to be, it's going to be a great player. And I remember I told a whole bunch of Seahawks fans here, I said, watch out for that number 3 Russell Wilson, because I guarantee you in the next 2 to 3 years he's going to be starting for your team. And lo and behold, they weren't even out of preseason or training camp, and they already announced him as, you know, the pretty much the guy that's going to be behind center. And it didn't surprise me, and I'm kind of surprised with how successful he's being. That he is right. He's got a really, really good team that he's playing behind. That's a scary defense and a really, really scary offense. But that kid has really brought that team together. Now, even with the benefit of hindsight, if I'm an owner and I'm taking a look at this situation, would I go back and still draft RG3? To be absolutely honest with you, I would still take RG3, because I personally still think that RG3, behind Andrew Luck, those two were the best quarterbacks to come out of that draft. I think the ceiling is really, really high on this kid. The potential is high on this kid. I mean, how can you refute how he dismantled Dallas last year in Dallas?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That game.
Yeah.
I go back to that game and I watch that game and it's like, this is unbelievable quarterback play from a rookie quarterback. That's the potential that we have, and I don't even think that's even his potential. I think he could probably be better than that. But to go from that to what it is we got right now, a lot of that is indicative of not having an off season. I'm a huge proponent of being there every day off season. You're doing the workouts, you're throwing, you're getting your offense down, you're getting your timing routes down. Griffin had nothing to do with he couldn't do any of this because he was nursing this leg.
Right.
So I'm not surprised with his performance this year and his inability to be consistent at the passing game. I think bringing in a new head coach in the offseason isn't going to help the situation either. We could see a repeat performance next year, just bringing in a brand new head coach with a brand new regime and brand new. I mean, I think a lot of people taking a look at this Andy Reid situation and thinking, well, we just bring in a new coach and we'll be looking at going to the playoffs. That doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
That's very, very few and far between. So it's a very, very touchy situation. But honestly, it's like what you were saying. You know, we're looking for that RG3 receipt, and I'm scratching my head thinking, am I going to take this kid again, considering how much we gave up for him? We're still not out of all these draft picks that we gave up for him. Rams are looking to get a really, really good pick this year because of
I think that's the worst part about all of this is how bad we are right now. And when you look at how bad we are, when you're a bad football team, there's always a silver lining. Okay? You can always look and say, well, at least we're getting a high draft pick. You know, if I'm going to stink, at least let me benefit from being a bad football team. And we can't even say that. With every loss, I keep looking up, and I mentioned this maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago. I mean, when I realized we're not a good football team. Like, after that Minnesota game, I came to the realization that we're not good. We're not good enough this year. Like, I had this false sense of, we're going to wake up and smell the coffee because we're a good team. You know, we're a good team that's just playing bad football right now, but we'll come around. You know, and I was still living off of what we had done a season ago. And I was waiting for the team to wake up, and I felt like after that Chicago game, we were going to hit our stride. And then we went the next week, and I can't remember who we played, but we lost. And then I said, okay, we were supposed to lose that game. And I believe that next game was Denver. And I said, okay, we're going to lose that game. But I said, after that Denver game, we're going to ratchet it up. And then we come home and we beat San Diego. And I'm thinking, all right, here we go. I had said it's the road to recovery, 3-step process, beat San Diego, beat Minnesota, beat Philadelphia. We're back at 500. And I really sincerely thought we were going to do that. And then we lose to Minnesota on Thursday night, and I realized, I had an epiphany. We're not a good football team. And it's tough. Huh?
That was a game we should have won.
That was a game we should have won, and it was tough to swallow the fact that we weren't a good team. But then I started looking at the pick, and I said, well, man, now the Rams are going to get a good pick. I really want to turn this into a middle of the first round pick. We need to win 7 or 8 games and make it so that this pick that the Rams gets from us isn't a top 5 pick. Well, forget about top 5. If we're not careful, they'll be getting the number 1 pick in the draft from us. How debilitating will that be to look over and say, and I mean, if I'm the Rams and I don't need a quarterback, if you're still buying Sam Bradford and St. Louis, you trade out of that pick. You dangle that pick in front of somebody, and you parlay this Robert Griffin III pick into picks for years to come. And so this could have been us.
Yes.
Wow. And so I'm in the same frame of mind as you, in the same way of thinking, in the same camp that you have subscribed to. If I had to do it over again, I would take him again. The talent is undeniable. I think the sky's the limit for this guy. I just think he's immature and he has some things that he has to learn. And I hope that whoever is able to get into his ear and he actually listens to them, I hope that he, takes their advice and heeds to their advice and he can learn from all of this. I'm hoping that he's learning. And right now I don't get the feeling that he's learning from any of this. But I hope that he is. I sincerely do, because right now a lot of what is happening in Washington is self-inflicted, could be avoided, and it's not being avoided because of situations like the one we saw today with his comments after the game. And I know the Mike Shanahan story is true because he didn't deny it. I mean, if it's not true, you just go out and say, no, that didn't happen. And he could have easily said, that didn't happen, but this isn't the time to talk about it. But that's not true. It didn't happen, but I'll address that at a later date and time. But that didn't happen. And he could have shut that down and put that to rest, and we wouldn't even be talking about it right now. But the fact that he said this isn't the time for me to discuss my relationship with the owner or that whole situation that happened a year ago, I'll address that at another time. That essentially tells you and validates that it in fact happened. This is real, and I do not have a good relationship with the owner, and it is because of our quarterback. And all of this stuff is real, and I don't think Robert has a good relationship with Mike Shanahan. I think he wants him to get fired. I think he will get fired because of this. We will owe Mike Shanahan and this staff a lot of money. I'm hearing upwards of $18 to $21 million that we'll have to pay them. And so the charade just goes on and on and on. But man, I tell you what, it is a huge soap opera in Washington, man.
Literally is. Well, one of the good things I think that I think the silver lining in this is if we are going to be looking at bringing in.
So there is a silver lining. That's what you're telling me.
I'm trying to look at this as possibly can.
Okay.
Anybody that have known me long enough, I think the only reason why I've been able to keep my sanity as a Redskin fan for the last 20 years is I've tried to really take a look at, the positives in anything. And in this situation, if we're going to bring in a new head coach, one of the attractions to bringing in a head coach is knowing that you're going to be working with an RG3. That's got to be a pretty big attraction to a lot of different coaches out there. I would think that if you ever had a really good chance at getting a guy like a John Gruden, this would probably be it. I mean, would you want to bring this guy in and with the oldest line, the oldest offensive line in football with Jason Campbell behind center? Probably not. I mean, I'm pretty sure he took a look at that and said, no.
You're right.
But taking a look at the tools and the weapons that we have, we've got some great players on this team. I think we have a playoff caliber team just given this roster alone. We just got a couple things we got to fix here and there. And a coach knowing that he can come into this organization and work with a guy like Robert Griffin III, that's a guy that can get you to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You just around him, protect him, he can get you to a Super Bowl. And that's got to be very enticing for a coach out there.
And that's what I think. We've got a legitimate shot at. That's why I said, like you said, how this whole situation is handled with Daniel Snyder is key, because that will probably influence how you'll be able to get other guys to come in to Washington to be the head coach. And everyone's followed this situation closely that's in, the football ranks. And so they know how this thing has unfolded, and that Robert Griffin III is at the heart of this whole situation. And so I'm pretty sure that whoever is the head coach of the Redskins next, because I think we're in an agreement that head coach won't be Mike Shanahan effectively at the end of this season. I'm hoping that it's effectively at the end of the season. On Black Monday, he's fired. Then if he's in fact going to be fired, which we pretty much have come to agreement that it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Whoever the next head coach is, I think that, like you said, the talent is undeniable, and a guy like John Gruden, I feel like he would be enticed more so than a place like Houston, where they don't have a quarterback, they don't know who their quarterback is going to be. They're an aging football team. A lot of their better players are on the downside of their career or at the apex and on the way down. And I feel like the future's brighter in Washington than it is in Houston right now.
I do too.
That team was built.
Let me go on your show here and ask you a question. But I got
sure.
Something I would kind of want to get your opinion on, and this is something that was brought up last week from listening to some of the media that I listened to. Mm-hmm. This notion has been brought up that, I mean, in your honest opinion, just taking a look at the situation as an outsider here, it's obvious that Mike Shanahan's stretch play offense requires a medium-sized, smaller-sized lineman to be able to be more mobile, to come out and make that second-tier block in order to get that, that stretch running play to be more effective. It's been brought up last week that maybe Mike Shanahan's notion of a successful offense is a bit outdated. What is your opinion when somebody makes a statement like that? Do you think that Mike Shanahan's idea of a successful offense is passé?
I knew where you were going with this when you started. I knew exactly where you were heading, and I was gearing up for the fastball, and I was sitting on it, and I got it. That's garbage. That's hogwash.
Ask my friend. This is me walking around.
Yeah. That to me, that's hogwash, and here's why. Where was all of these comments last year when we were on a 7-game winning streak?
Great point.
I mean, when we were winning, was his offense outdated then? When Alfred Morris was rushing for 1,600 yards, was his offense outdated then? Sure, they, put in some different things because of the special talent that Robert is that allowed Alfred to really capitalize off of the read option and all of that stuff. But we still ran a lot of zone run blocking scheme, still a lot of stretch plays. And honestly, I don't think we ran enough of that this year. I thought that everything we did this year was from the pistol. It was from the shotgun. It was from read option, from the spread. Not enough plays under center where Robert actually has to run, hand it off, stretch handoff, let Alfred stick his foot in the ground and go. I thought that we got away from that, which bootleg comes off of that. I don't think we did enough of that this year, but his offense worked to perfection last season when we set all kinds of records. Robert threw 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Nobody was saying the offense was outdated then when Alfred Morris was running for over 1,600 yards and setting Redskins, rookie records, franchise records for rushing. The offense wasn't outdated then. Again, it's all about the amount of success that you have. And this is a what have you done for me lately league. So last year, this offense was phenomenal. No one could stop it. This year, we're having struggles. Teams have made adjustments. He hasn't made adjustments to the adjustments. Robert didn't have the offseason, so him being a pocket passer is a little questionable. This offensive line in front of him is abysmal from the center over on the right side. And so a lot of the things that you want to do, you can't do. And I'm not sure, and I've always questioned this, I'm not sure if Robert is reading the field well anyway. And so a lot of people have been beating up Kyle Shanahan for his play calling, but what do you do as a play caller when your quarterback only sees half of the field? And people have been reporting that all year long, that Kyle Shanahan wants to open it up like he did in Houston, but he can't because Robert doesn't read the field well enough or fast enough. And there's validity to that. I've seen it myself firsthand when I see guys open and Robert simply didn't get to that read fast enough before he takes a sack. Or plenty of times. Or Robert simply just didn't see that guy who was wide open. Or he didn't make a good enough throw. And so, I mean, it goes both ways. Yeah, Kyle Shanahan hasn't called the best game all the time. And sure, he's went away. That Denver game, to me, was the worst in terms of play calling. You're up 21-7. Denver goes down, they score a touchdown, and you just totally abandon the run. And the run was working in that game. That was, to me, everybody wants to talk about we're not running the ball. There's certain instances where you could argue that, yeah, we're not running the ball, but if Robert completes play action fake to a wide open receiver on first down, we're not having this discussion. So, I mean, how many times has somebody been wide open on play action fake? The Minnesota game, the San Diego game, where a guy's wide open and Robert simply misses him on first down on play action fake for a huge gain that could change the complexion of the game. I mean, it happens all the time, and so it's to me, it's just a farce that they would suggest that his offense is outdated. Now, I think a better question, and I'll pose this to you, has the game passed Mike Shanahan by? Because looking at him and his in-game adjustments, I think we're one of the worst teams in terms of halftime adjustments, especially this year. And I think that last year, you really can throw last year out as an anomaly because his first season, his second year, we didn't have any talent. And I didn't think he made a lot of adjustments then. But him just being a good head coach in those first 2 years, I thought kept us in ball games that we had no business being in because he was a good head coach. But last year, I felt like he got away with a lot of things, and a lot of things got to be masked. I thought he was terrible at managing the game last season, but because we were such a prolific offense and we were getting so many turnovers, I think a lot of people forget, we were plus 17 in the turnover differential last year. I mean, this defense was historically bad. I keep trying to reiterate to people that this defense was historically bad last year. And this didn't just spring on us this year. This defense was historically... We gave up the 6th most yards in a NFL season last year. So we were historically bad last season. The only difference between this year's defense and last year's defense is that we forced turnovers. I mean, we were getting turnovers at an alarming rate. And guess what we weren't doing on the offensive side? We weren't giving the football back to teams. We forced turnovers, and we were taking those turnovers, turning them into points. And offensively, we were scoring points. So you couple the fact that we were scoring points, we were outscoring, the opposition. We went to New Orleans and put up 40 points last season. When's the last time we scored 40 points? When's the last time we went to New Orleans and scored 40 points and beat the Saints? That was unheard of, and that was in his first game. And so I just feel like Mike Shanahan as a coach isn't making in-game adjustments. He's not making halftime adjustments. And he's not a good game manager. You talked about it earlier, wasting timeouts. I feel like in the second half, timeouts are like precious jewels that you have to treasure. You can't waste timeouts on challenges and nonsense like that. And then his explanations at the press conference, well, I didn't really get a good look at it. They were going to run a play, so I just thought I'd challenge him. What are you talking about? You can't waste a timeout just on a whim. Oh, maybe he dropped the ball. I'll just challenge it and see. No, you don't do that. So between that, the clock management at the end of games, and his inability to make adjustments at the half, I think maybe the game might have passed him by in that sense, because I can't remember him being this bad in Denver at managing the game and managing the clock and making adjustments. So that aspect to me might be more valid, that he may have been passed by the game. But in terms of his offense not working, it's not like he's Joe Gibbs 2.0, where Joe was still trying to run counter Trey, in 2005. Yeah. No, I mean, I remember when Joe Gibbs came back and we couldn't even complete a slant because Joe was still with max protect, 2-man routes. I mean, this is 2005. You can't run 2-man routes. And that's essentially what we were doing this year, running 2-man routes with max protect. You can't do that in this day and age. It doesn't work anymore. And so
and that's something
I pose the question to you.
That's something that doesn't get brought up very much, and it surprises me that it doesn't, is that we changed our offensive scheme this year a little bit. We went to more of a max protect formation because, and I don't blame Shanahan, because let's face it, my career here in DC as head coach is going to be short-lived if that quarterback gets hurt again. Right. So obviously I'm going to want to put some people back there to protect him, and I got to tell you, it really is like nails on a chalkboard to me when I see that formation. When I see us go back there with one running back, two running backs, that one of them's lined up in that H-back formation, and that's all he's doing is sitting back there and protecting Robert Griffin III, because there's only 2, possibly 3 receivers that are even out there on the field, right, and that have to try to fight to get open. And RG3 is going to stare down at least one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you hit that right on the head. He's going to stare one guy like he did today on the interception. It's a slant. I mean, how easy...
When Wilcott foreshadowed that.
Yeah, man.
Like, I'll play later, it happened.
Yeah. It was funny because he sure did. The very play before that, he stared down the receiver, and it was a completion to Pierre Garçon. And he's like, he was staring at him. No, matter of fact, it was up the sideline to, was it the tight end or was it a running back? Somebody out of the backfield. I want to say it was a tight end or something. But anyway, somebody out of the backfield. He's staring him down the whole way. He threw it to him, and he made the completion. And on the very next play, Pierre runs the slant. He's staring him down. And I always talk about Robert staring down receivers, and really giving off the hint that he's about to throw the football to a specific area. And sure enough, a veteran linebacker like Derek Johnson, reading his eyes the whole entire way, takes him right to the football, picks it off. And to me, that set off the chain of events that got us blown out in this game. I mean, special teams was going to do what they did anyway, but the Chiefs hadn't really done anything yet to put us out of our misery to that point. That interception really just opened the floodgates. And that's been him this season. The inability to, and that's why I felt like that Giants game was a positive, because he was going through his progressions. You could see his head. 1, 2, 3, check down. And I didn't see that today.
He was sliding.
Yeah. He was maneuvering within the pocket, and I thought I was starting to see him mature right in front of my eyes. Yeah. And I felt like he reverted back to his old ways today, where it was, hey, I'm going to stare at this receiver, and I'm going to wait till he comes open, and if he doesn't, I'm just going to run. He didn't check it down not one time today. You can't tell me that check down wasn't there today. It was there last week. It's probably been there all season long. I'm pretty sure if I go back and watch the games from the all 22s, the check down is there.
Yeah.
He just opted not to take it today. And he's opted not to take it all season long. So.
And this league will make you pay. If you're gonna sit down your receiver, these guys that play at this level, they will make you pay.
Absolutely. And so I don't know. Where do we go from here? BFG?
Honestly, where we go from here, if what I would like to see happen is I think that we're beyond being able to repair this fissure that's basically erupted between head coach and owner, and even quarterback. I'll throw quarterback in there as well. I think that like I said earlier, I think that we need to be very, very intelligent. We need to be very, very patient and smart about any move that we make from here until the end of the season. And I think we let Shanahan finish the job with this season as our head coach. I'm starting to see escalation here in the performance of our play and in how poor it is. I hope that it doesn't get worse than this. I'm not going to guarantee it. It's hard to imagine that it could possibly get worse than this. But I think that we've got to let him finish this out under the mindset that if we're going to get somebody else in here, firing our head coach right now may not necessarily be the wisest decision on the planet to make. And frankly, another thing that really kind of concerns me is placating to the 23-year-old quarterback. Eventually, this guy's got to grow up and be a man. And eventually, he's got to accept the situation for what it is and do what it is that we pay him to do. This isn't Disneyland. This isn't a video game where you get to shut it off and come back and play under the circumstances that fit you. Right. Eventually, you've got to bring somebody in here that's going to be able to take control of this organization, run it in a fashion that's going to be professional, that's going to be efficient, and RG3's got to be on board with that. Right. Because we can't go through any more episodes like this unless, not only is the media going to turn against him, but his fan base is going to start turning against him too. And it's not any commercial on the planet that's going to be able to, that's going to want to come within 10 meters of this kid. And I hope it does never come to that. I see a lot of potential in this organization, and if anybody's smart coming into Washington wanting to be a head coach, will definitely be able to see the potential that this team has and the building blocks that are pretty much kind of there in place. Just bringing in a couple key positions here and there, and where we should be a pretty good contender. Like I said before, we can go to the Super Bowl with this guy, but the only thing that scares me more than letting go a head coach, bringing in Art Briles, the one thing that scares me to death is the actions of our owner. He's not, in my opinion, the most intelligent individual when it comes to the media, when it comes to making sound, clear-minded decisions. He's very reactionary, very knee-jerkish, and that concerns me more than anything. And this guy, let's face it, this guy's going to outlive you and I. So if you're going to be a Redskins fan in this day and age, we're going to be stuck with Daniel Snyder for the rest of. I'll be stuck with him for the rest of my life. And I'm really hoping that my statements from years ago. I used to say years ago that I don't think I would ever see us win another Super Bowl under a Dan Snyder. And last year, I was really, really glad to kind of have that monkey off my back and say, okay, we finally got the quarterback. We finally are looking good. This is great to be a Redskins fan because we're finally going to be back in the hunt, only to be back here. Only to be here. And now it's like all over again. It's like, oh my gosh, I mean, is this ever going to happen for us again with this guy as our owner? Because it's, we've got a lot of issues besides this, but this is the biggest one on the plate right now. And I think if every decision that you made, I will quote LeVar Arrington here on this because I think he makes a very, very good point. Every decision that you make from here on out has to have value. It has to have value. If it doesn't have value, you've really got to seriously go back to the drawing board and rethink it because we haven't been notorious for doing that.
I totally wholeheartedly agree with you. I feel like what we do in the next 2 months is going to affect this franchise for at least the next 3 years. Easy. And so these next 2 months, every decision, every move that is made needs to be extremely calculated and it needs to be well thought out. And it needs to be a collective effort between Bruce Allen, the general manager, and the owner, Daniel Snyder. And whatever happens, everybody needs to be on board, not just Daniel Snyder. This needs to be a organizational move, not a Daniel Snyder move. And so we'll see how it all shakes out. I think that we've already basically said that Shanahan's gone. Next coach coming in, we don't know who it'll be, but whoever it is, they've got to be able to get Robert to understand that he's got to be on board and that these outbursts can't happen, and he's got to do, like you said, what he's here to be, to do, and what he's being paid to do, and that's play quarterback and nothing else. And so we'll see how it all shakes out. But man, it's been a pleasure, BFG. Burgundy Fly Guy, everybody. Thank him for being on the show. Tell everybody how they can find you. And if you haven't subscribed to his page on YouTube, please do so. Check out his show, the Burgundy Fly Guy blog. It is a great show. Check him out. Tell everybody how they can find you. Everywhere. All your outlets, everywhere. On YouTube, everything.
Well, pretty much the only thing that I really have up right now, I've got a Facebook page, and you can follow me on Facebook. I've got a link in a lot of my show notes that you can go on there and follow me on that. But mainly the only thing that I've really got out there is my show, the BFG show, and you can find that. I believe it's at the. You can look at it in the search engine. You put in BFG show, and you'll be able to find me. My tag name is Burgundy Fly Guy. You can catch me on that. But yeah, now that I'm back on, I'm going to try to be pumping out more videos here. I was hitting about one a week because we've got, Lord knows, there's been a lot of stuff on every week with this. You and I have not been shy of material.
No, absolutely not.
Everything about this season, we are not shy on material.
Absolutely not. It's they've given us more material than we probably could have even asked for. And so at this point, I actually would love it if they gave me less material.
Yeah, exactly.
I've gotten...
Things are going well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm looking at the time now, hour and 30 minutes worth of footage we've just recorded, just here talking. I mean, that's how much stuff they've given us to talk about. I mean, that we could sit here and chop it up for an hour and 30 minutes. So...
Well, thanks again for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor.
No problem, man. I thank you for being on the show, and I think this was long overdue. We needed to do this together and really tackle this thing because I feel like, I mean, your views are a lot like mine, and so I really felt like we needed to come together and do this. So it was a pleasure, man. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. So there you have it. I mean, we've essentially broken down where we feel like this franchise is right now and where they're going, and nobody knows. Again, it's the unknown, and when you're in the unknown and when you're traveling into the unknown, it's a dangerous situation because, again, most humans are fearful of the unknown, and we don't know what's going to happen next. The only thing we can say with any kind of certainty right now is that Mike Shanahan isn't going to be back. I think we can all agree on that. And so from that point on, everything else is a mystery right now, and we'll see how it's all going to unfold. But we still got 3 games. We're talking as if this season is over. We got 3 games left. It could get a lot worse than what we saw today against Kansas City. And to think it can get worse is so scary. But it can get worse. I mean, that was embarrassing to lose by 35 at home and no one even be there to witness it. But we've got 3 games. We still got to play Dallas one more time. Do you want to get blown out by Dallas? Man.
Looking forward to that.
Oh, God. I'm a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. My Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to my beloved Redskins. Hey, at least we're not talking about the name change anymore, right?
That's true. I got that to look forward to.
Oh my gosh, we are in peril right now. I'll see you next time here on the Redskins Report.
The Redskins Report.